they got used to.
Mm-hmm.
What's it on? Being criticized, being the ritual, not being first.
I wonder which people he's met because that is a very interesting. I'm going to use the word accusation here.
It was an accusation.
Strange.
It was
It's
criticism.
a strange accusation to make against Hasidim to me. Um,
I just didn't seem. Yeah, I thought so too. I mean, considering everything that Chabad does, I mean, the guys in Coral Springs used to give out free food every Wednesday until they couldn't afford to do it anymore. And
right. Yeah. Did
So
you end
you're
up looking
also
up the Samaritans at all?
I don't really have time.
No.
I was busy.
Okay.
One I can bring my book to you.
No, no. I'll hear the synopsis. Let's start with putting a coin in for charity, and we'll make
There
a
are
blessing.
interesting people. I mean, it's history.
Historically,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean,
We'll make our blessing that say before we learn Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kedeshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al divrei Torah. One more question. Susie, do you know if Joan's going to be joining us this morning? I don't see her on yet.
no, she's not. She has an appointment,
Okay.
so getting ready right now. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. So I don't remember exactly where we left off, but I think we left off at the beginning of B. I apologize if I'm a little out of it today. I have a very bad headache, but we'll get
So
through it.
why you're doing it then, Rabbi?
Today,
If you're not
today is the 20th day of Kislev. Yesterday marked the 19th of Kislev, which is when the Alter Rebbe was released from jail, as we spoke at length last week. And today is also a very special holiday because today is the day that he was released from the house of the Misnagid. Misnagdim are those who opposed the Hasidic movement, which we mentioned at length last week as well. And the story goes that when they took nobody knew, it wasn't big fanfare, right? When they were releasing this dangerous prisoner, which the Russians never did. They killed people whether they were guilty of crimes or not guilty of crimes. And so releasing someone from the Shpalerka prison, which was the Alcatraz of the USSR or whatever they were called at the time.
yeah, with
As,
Russia,
sorry, Russia,
the Empire of Russia.
right?
Right?
Was well, is not something that they did with great fanfare, shall we say? And so there were some, and also most Jews did not live in Moscow at the time because it was very expensive. You had to pay a very special tax, especially if you were Jewish, to live in Moscow. And there were not a lot of Jews who lived in Moscow.
That was in the Pale.
Sorry, yeah.
The Pale.
Um, so you had this one building which had an upstairs and a downstairs. The upstairs was the home of a chassid, and the downstairs was the home of a misnagid who hated chassidim and hated the Alter Rebbe with a passion. And anyways, the Alter Rebbe was released, and he told them to the address that he wants to be taken to, and they brought him by mistake. They brought him downstairs instead of upstairs. And that was on the 19th of Kislev in the afternoon. And for 3 hours, he was there in the home of this Misnagid who was badgering him relentlessly. Anyways, um, the Hasidim who were around thought that they heard rumors that perhaps the Alter Rebbe is being released from jail. And so they figured who would they get sent to the home of this Chassid he would know. So they come upstairs, and he doesn't know of anything. And they realize what must have happened. So they go downstairs and they hear through the door, they hear this man screaming at the Alter Rebbe. And enraged as they were, I don't know if they busted in the door or how they got in. and they wanted to beat this man to a pulp. Like, who do you think you are? Just screaming at the Rebbe like that. And the Alter Rebbe made with his hand, he said, "Stop, this is not the way we act." And they took him and they brought him back, and that was on the 20th of Kislev that he made it back upstairs, I guess, and then eventually home. So if we look on student page 5, where it says otherworldly visitors. Now, there are okay. There is a well-known story related by Hasidim that when the Alter Rebbe was in prison, his teacher, the Maggid, together with the teacher of his teacher, the Baal Shem Tov, came to visit him from, as we call it, the world of truth. They came to visit him from the Garden of Eden, from heaven. They had already passed away many years earlier. The Alter Rebbe did not recognize the Baal Shem Tov because he never saw him. But when he saw this figure entering before the Maggid, he understood who it was. If he's the teacher of the Maggid, then he must be the Baal Shem Tov.
Who's the Maggid?
The Maggid of Mizrich was the successor of the Baal Shem Tov, the teacher of the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe asked his visitors why this imprisonment had happened to him and what was being demanded of him. They answered that there was a strong complaint against him in the heavenly court for teaching so much Hasidic philosophy and doing so publicly. The Alter Rebbe asked, if I am released from here, should I stop teaching Hasidus? And they replied, since you have begun, do not stop. On the contrary, when you leave, teach even more. And in fact, the Tanya, which you may have heard of, which is the Alter Rebbe's, what they call it, magnum opus, was written after he came out of jail. This raises a question. There's a well-known story that occurred during the lifetime of the Maggid in which the Alter Rebbe neutralized the arguments against the spreading of Hasidus, which we learned last week about the paper that was flying and falling on the floor, and he gave the parable of the king's crown jewel. So he was able to defend the study and spreading of Hasidic philosophy. This raises a simple question. When there had been an argument against the Maggid many years earlier, the Alter Rebbe had neutralized it by explaining that publicizing and spreading Hasidus was absolutely necessary, a matter of life and death, like saving the life of the king's son. Meaning, Judaism would have been lost forever had it not been for the study of Hasidus. If so, how could the Alter Rebbe ask the Maggid whether he should stop, God forbid, from teaching Hasidus? Could such a thought even occur to him after he himself had already explained that it is truly a life or death matter? Page number 6. To answer this, we first need to raise an additional question about the entire matter. The argument had already arisen during the leadership of the Maggid, as mentioned. It had been neutralized through the Alter Rebbe's explanation using the parable of grinding the precious stone from the king's crown in order to save the lives of the king's son. If so, what changed? What had emerged during the period between the Maggid's leadership and the Alter Rebbe, a period of 26 years, that caused a new complaint to arise against the Alter Rebbe after the earlier arguments against the Maggid had already been neutralized years before? So the second question that we're asking here is, if it had already been hashed and rehashed, shall we say, or it had already been hashed out, that the spreading of Hasidus was legitimate and important. If that's the case, why is there another complaint against the Alter Rebbe for spreading Hasidus if that argument had already been brought up and already been answered? Page number 7. The explanation is as follows. During this period, the manner in which Hasidus was being revealed had changed. Therefore, even though the argument against the Maggid had been nullified through the parable of the king's son, a new complaint rose against the Alter Rebbe because of his new method that he began using to teach Hasidus. The difference between the approach of the Alter Rebbe and that of the Maggid in spreading Hasidus is as follows. The Alter Rebbe began presenting these teachings in a way that engaged all of the intellectual faculties, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. In the terminology of the Zohar, it became something people could be sustained by. When there is an initial flash of insight, followed by focused contemplation, and then a deep bond of knowledge that the person brings into their actual day to day life, the person becomes unified with the idea in an incredible union to the point that it becomes like part of the person's own flesh and blood, as is explained in Tanya. As we see in practice, the teachings revealed by the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid are compared to brief bullet points in comparison to the elaborations found in the Alter Rebbe's book of the Tanya. Page number 8. This shift in the revelation of Hasidus during the Alter Rebbe's period, expanding them into a system of explanation, comprehension, and understanding, is what led to the new argument against the Alter Rebbe, even after the earlier argument had already been dismissed. To explain further, in the parable given by the Alter Rebbe about saving the life of the king's son by grinding the precious stone from the king's crown, the parable that had neutralized the argument against the Maggid, the decisive point is the hope that a single drop will enter the mouth of the king's son. That one drop is what will save his life. This means revealing the teaching of Hasidus, the most precious jewel of the king's crown, in point form, a single drop. Since this is God's Torah, especially the inner dimension thereof, a single drop, one teaching, is enough to revive the king's son. And that's exactly what happened. The revelation of Hasidus in point form in the time of the Baal Shem Tov, in the time of the Maggid, and during the initial period of the Alter Rebbe, did in fact succeed in reviving the king's son, breathing new life into the Jewish people. However, when the Alter Rebbe began revealing Hasidus not only as brief points or single drops, but an expanded format of Chabad, a new argument arose against him in the heavenly court. Source number 5, Chaim, would you like to read for us? 9.
But you may indeed become distant, even per the definition of Torah, the Torah of kindness. Nevertheless, Chabad Hasidut explains that because God promises that none who is distant will be left behind, it is possible to explain to them the deepest teachings of the Torah, even to one who is not yet observant of the mitzvah. Since they're intelligent people, this will penetrate their minds, and ultimately the study will lead to action, resulting in a change in their conduct and active engagement in the observance of mitzvah.
Thank you.
Ethan?
No, that's good. So what he's saying over here is that what the Alter Rebbe started doing is teaching Hasidus in a very understandable way, even to people who are not on the highest of spiritual standings, religious standings. Because of the argument in the heavenly court, events unfolded below in such a way that the government viewed the conduct of the Alter Rebbe as a rebellion against their rule. Consequently, circumstances developed that made the continuation of the Alter Rebbe's work in revealing Chabad Hasidus an illegal act against the government. Since this was the case, a halachic question arose for the Alter Rebbe. Is there a halachic obligation for him to risk his life by engaging in what they were determining as counter-revolutionary activities?
So what was the difference in the way he was teaching? Was he teaching it more extensively or more thoroughly?
Exactly, yeah. Less ethereal and more easy to understand.
Or more detailed or less?
Much more detailed.
More
But it's less of an inspirational one-liner and more of something that you can
Like a
learn
concrete
and
plan of action
understand.
that a state may take offense to or attack, like fit it down with the details.
Right. If you look at the short writings of the Baal Shem Tov, the things he said were very short, very concise, and were very inspiring, but not necessarily as
More poetic.
exactly hard to wrap your brain around and really internalize the concept. Whereas the Alter Rebbe's writings about, for example, Hasidic concepts in the Parsha and the weekly Torah portion are God bless you, are much more detailed and much better explained. And then you have his son who took over, and comparison to him, his son took that and really ran with it. And then the Tzemach Tzedek who followed him, the third Chabad Rebbe, also we have 20, 30 books of his writings, and so on and so forth, explaining.
What is it that you how to really actually get over the vocalization of the standard teaching?
That is a very good question.
And it seems to be
That is a very good question, and the answer is, what's the bottom line that comes out of it? Are you learning to intellectualize, or are you learning to change who you are? Hasidic thought, Hasidic teachings. When you learn a Maimer of Hasidus, maybe we should start at some point. Learning just pure Hasidus. It changes you in a very powerful way. I'll tell you a story I heard last night. There was a guy who when he was must have been 19 or 20, and he was a yeshiva student, and he didn't go into details, but he had some kind of a situation that teenage boys might get into, involving another human being, shall we say. And he felt very bad about himself. Here I am, this super religious boy, and this is the situation that I've gotten myself into. He was feeling a lot of self-doubt, shall we say, and he wasn't sure how to get himself out of the situation or what to do. Perhaps he should leave yeshiva. Maybe yeshiva is not for me if this is who I am. And he wrote a letter to the Rebbe describing the whole thing. And the Rebbe wrote back to him a very short message, which was, add in your study of Hasidic philosophy, and I will mention you in prayer at the grave of my father. So first of all, the Rebbe's entire approach was, stop dwelling on the negative. Negative things happen. Yes, we fall, we slip, we make bad decisions, we make bad mistakes. But don't dwell on them. Move on, move forward, and make yourself a better person. And that's the way that we're gonna get through these last years in exile and get to the coming of Mashiach. But Hasidic philosophy really changes you, and the more you involve yourself in it, it brings you into a different world. And the purpose of it is refinement, and of course, like you said, the Hasidic philosophy is part of the entire. There's the study of Hasidus, and there are the ways of Hasidus. And if you have someone, I mean, you could have people. Zalman Schechter is a great example. He was a master of Hasidic philosophy, yet when it came to his religious observance, was very lacking. He was extremely gifted in his understanding and his ability to explain Hasidic concepts, Hasidic philosophy.
His relation to Solomon Schechter?
Not Solomon Schechter, no. Zalman Schechter, he, I don't think so, at least. He
Went to Solomon Schechter baseball.
right. he was a rabbi in Winnipeg, Canada for a while.
Every modern time.
Sorry, yeah, we're talking in the 60s. He passed away not too long ago. Passed away probably within the past 15, 20 years. Still good something, bless you. They say about him that he used to always think about Hasidus. And there was someone who once saw him driving on Shabbos. And he said, "Why are you driving on Shabbat?" And he said, "Okay, good point. I have a guy drive me." A few weeks later, this guy sees him again. He's driving again. They said, "What happened?" He said, "It's not possible to fully concentrate on Hasidus if there's a guy in the car." That was his. I mean, it's very warped and backwards, and it's unfortunate the path that he ended up choosing.
So why was he so well known?
Why is he so well known? Because he was a genius. He was a genius. I know a kid who was in Winnipeg, and he met the gabbai of the shul, who described to him the gabbai is not the president of the shul, the how do you call the gabbai? The guy who gives out the aliyahs and makes sure that the Torah is rolled to the right place, the sexton they call it, I think.
Yeah.
And he met the gabbai of the shul who described to him what it was like when the board of the shul chased Zalman Schechter out of shul one Shabbos after his speech, where he was promoting for people to smoke weed, that they would be able to come to a better comprehension of what is God. So he took a very different path, but in terms of Hasidic philosophy, he was a genius. He had such a clear way of explaining things. I've never listened to anything from him, but I know people who have, and they said that his ability to explain was phenomenal. Him and Shlomo Carlebach were actually study partners. So Shlomo Carlebach also was a very bright individual. There are mixed feelings about him. Some people are very happy about him because he with his singing and storytelling inspired many Jewish people. On the other hand, he had, I mean, of course, I don't look on him as extremely favorable because he left Chabad and started his own thing and caused a great deal of pain for the Rebbe. So you could look him up. He was anyway. The practical lesson from all the above, page number 10, or the bottom of 9, sorry. The Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid instructed the Alter Rebbe that not only should he, under no circumstances, stop teaching Chassidus, but on the contrary, he should increase his efforts even more. This creates a clear directive for his students and their students for all generations to intensify with great enthusiasm the spreading of these teachings outward. Oh, sorry, I was in the middle of I lost my train of thought there. So there's the study of Hasidic philosophy and there's the ways of Hasidim, and the two cannot be separated from each other. If the outcome of your study of Hasidic philosophy is leading you to drive on Shabbos, then of course there's something wrong there. Key points. The Baal Shem Tov was revealed during a period of physical and spiritual crisis, a rift between Torah scholars and simple Jews, and a spiritual drought. The Baal Shem Tov emphasized that God loves every Jew, even the most simple, and taught that every detail in the world is supervised through specific divine providence. When a dispute arose regarding the extent of spreading Hasidus, the Alter Rebbe resolved it through a parable showing that the dissemination of Hasidus should be expanded, not limited. When the Alter Rebbe was imprisoned, the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid of Mezrich visited the Alter Rebbe from heaven and told him that his imprisonment was a result of a heavenly complaint that arose over his spreading of Hasidus. He asked them, when I am released, should I continue? They instructed him to continue and even increase the dissemination. The question arises, if in previous generations the complaint had already been neutralized and the conclusion had been reached that Hasidus should be disseminated, why did the Alter Rebbe hesitate again? And if the complaint was neutralized in the era of Maggid, why did it arise again? The explanation. The Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid revealed Hasidus as a concentrated point, whereas the Alter Rebbe expanded and explained Hasidus intellectually and conceptually, resulting in its much wider dissemination. The Alter Rebbe's parable neutralized only the complaint regarding a point-like dissemination, but when Hasidus expanded, a new complaint arose.
What is this heavenly complaint? I mean, who in heaven was complaining? I mean, it was the czarist and the secret police who were complaining, and I don't think you can really call that a heavenly complaint.
Very good, very good. So we believe that everything that happens down here is as a result of things that are happening in heaven. For example, we see that the Rebbe very strongly encouraged the laying of tefillin, that every Jewish boy and man over 13 should put on tefillin in the days leading up to the 6-day war. And we see what kind of effect that had, that as opposed to a war that was supposed to be devastating for the Jewish people, the spiritual efforts that had been made to put on tefillin, for the women to light Shabbat candles, made a huge impact on the way the war played out. Nothing that happens in this world is happenstance. Everything that happens is because spiritually there's something going on. And the Alter Rebbe understood that if there's complaints against him in the physical world, then spiritually there must be something misaligned as well. And the answer is that the side which God entrusted with the job of distracting the people from doing what is good. Some people call him Satan, some people call it the evil inclination, call it what you will, does not like that section of spirituality, shall we call them, that host of angels does not like it when the Jews have better tools with which to stay on the straight and narrow.
That was also close to concept of preservation.
I would say it's very different because here it's the Alter Rebbe was doing something which caused a stir in the evil side.
So it wasn't predetermined that he would do that.
Right. He was the one who was stirring the pot, and then the evil angels came and said, "You're taking away you're making our job too hard. We have to stop this." And because of that, down here, what happened is that the Alter Rebbe was put in jail, and he said, "Well, am I doing the wrong thing here? Should I continue?" And the answer was, you got to take care of the Jewish people and make sure that they have every tool at their disposal to fight against their own inner evil and the global evil, and to bring Mashiach. Takeaway. The Hasidic movement was founded to infuse the Jewish people with new life and to turn the oi of Jewish life into joy. In the early generations of Hasidus, its teachings were expressed as brief spiritual sayings. I don't like the word spiritual. Brief, inspirational, and abstract sayings that inspired and warmed the Jewish hearts, but they were directed mainly toward people within the community, towards those who were already religious. The 19th of Kislev marks the development of Hasidus into a clear and intellectually rigorous system that can be taught and conveyed to any intellectual person. Anyone, whether religious or not, can understand and connect with the messages of the Tanya, the teachings of Chabad Hasidus as presented by the Alter Rebbe. When we study Hasidus, we should not be satisfied with a single small drop. We should immerse ourselves and study its teachings in depth, and they will bring us vitality and spiritual inspiration. I want to see if I can try and find a good example distinguishing the path of the Baal Shem Tov and the path of the Alter Rebbe that we can study and see the difference for ourselves.
When did the difference?
That we discussed last week. So the main what's it called, diffusion was after the Maggid passed away, and then all the different students kind of took their own little geographic area, and they continued on with what the Maggid was doing. And then you have the Alter Rebbe, who took it really to the next level.
So how much difference is there really between the different tracks?
Big difference. I would say the greatest difference is between Chabad and the rest.
Well,
I'm not sure how different the different Hasidic approaches are.
well, the ones who are total really anti, the ones who marked with the Arab.
So the ones who march with the Arabs are in just sick people. We've spoken about them before. I don't think they're a sect of Hasidim. I think that they are.
Even worse, they march with the Iranians.
They're
with the Ayatollahs.
it's whatever they. I think we've discussed this once before. I understand where they're coming from, but they took it into horrible places. Meaning, you can disagree with the fact that they established the state of Israel, but now to come and approve of people who are murdering Jews, that's not the way to handle it. You're upset about it, be upset about it. Pray for them. Don't march with those who wish us harm. Especially since, as we're seeing more and more clearly, that no one has any issue with Zionism. It's all an issue with Judaism. There's this guy, I think you would love him. His name is Yochai Sponder. He's an Israeli comedian. He's very funny. I was just watching a little clip of him about Hanukkah. Like, it was in the time. Also, he says the year BC and also the year BI. It was 163 years BC, which is also 865 years BI. What's BI? Before Islam. I think it's important to also like this. And so you have was between the Antiochus the 3 and Antiochus the 4. Antiochus, like anti-Zionist, he was Antiochus, but he was pro-Yochus, but just Antiochus. Who this guy Yochai Sponder. So it's different than the usual because he says you can be you. I don't not like the Jews, but I don't like the Jewish. You can be you, just a little bit less you. Like no bar mitzvahs, no Shabbat, but I like the Jews, but just don't be so you. A little bit less you. So the Jews did not want that, so basically he said, okay, let's get rid of the Jews. Then he says, and then there was, the Jews was argue. You know, you're looking at me, the Jews argue. In the old days, the Jews was argue. They didn't always agree on everything. So Matityahu and his 5 sons, they decided, Judah Maccabee, he says, let's go, we're going to show them what's up. We're going to go, we're going to kill them. And his father said, we're going to kill them? For every one of us, there's 1,000 of them. How are we going to kill them? And he says, you see, we know the land. We know the land. And because we know the land, we can win them. So from here we see that 3,000 years ago, already we know the land. We know the land also then.
You ever seen that German comedian on YouTube? The German comedian, very funny. He was given a concert in Israel recently, Boy, things are really bad with Israelis have to import a German to do
To
comedy.
do comedy. Oh man, is he the guy who says like you things a German can't say to his Jewish wife?
Probably, it sounds like it. But yeah,
It's like, why would you go by car? Let's take the train. Oh boy. Mark your calendars. Next week Sunday, not this Sunday, the next Sunday, the 21st. We're gonna be having at 5 p.m. Donuts and latkes and menorah lighting here at the Chabad house. And the following Thursday, December 25th,
I know, like
we're gonna be doing. Sorry,
Like to do your new.
we'll see. We'll find out.
How accurate are those predictions of what they?
Not really.
No.
Not very. We'll see. But on the 14th, the midwife that Nechama likes is going on vacation. So I'm hoping, not the 14th, the 21st. On the 21st, she's going on vacation. So I'm hoping that it'll happen before then.
But there's others.
But there are others, but this one
You
she
got a
really likes.
contingency plan.
Yeah, yeah, but, yeah. So, and then on the 25th, we're going to be having lunch, Chinese lunch, and I haven't yet decided on a topic. If you have any suggestions for a topic of what we should learn,
What's like the biggest difference between, say, Chabad?
the biggest difference between Chabad and Satmar, I would say, is what is the focus.
One thing.
So, yeah, well, the clothes we wear is very different. Exact, the payas. Yeah, that's very different. The clothing is different. But let's say, for example, Satmar, the way that they focus on their Judaism is by making a big deal about the clothing they wear, about the foods that they eat, the traditions that come with that, and remaining insular. And that is how they have their joy of Judaism, is through the excitement of the kugel on Shabbos and the chulent and the way they dress, and this holds them together. Whereas Chabad is, I would say, almost the polar opposite of it, which is that we dress however we dress. You wear whatever clothes you want, pretty much.
Yeah.
And the outreach is big, but I'm saying like for Chabad as a on its own, not necessarily the work that's done, the outreach work, which is a big difference, But I'm saying like in terms of like the actual Chabad. So the focus is on retaining our Judaism, not by being excited about the food. It's not a bad thing, but if you're doing it for the right reasons, but to learn more about God, to learn more about what we do and why we do it and how we do it, to gain a greater understanding of the rituals we do, a greater understanding of the God that we believe in, and to refine ourselves and excite ourselves through our intellect. Does that answer the question? So I'm not saying that they're not intellectual, and that they don't study Torah. That's not what I'm saying. But the focus is a very different focus.
And how did you do it? You're Joel.
Curious Yo.
That's what is that word?
I believe so. Yeah, that's summer. So on let's say on Shabbat afternoon, he'll hold what they call a tish, where all of the Hasidim will come into this huge room and he'll be there and they'll be singing and dancing and it will be very inspirational. I guess the difference is they call it the difference between Chabad and Chagas is the difference between intellect and emotion. Our focus is intellect, their focus is emotion. And if you ever been, it's just incredible to watch the energy of these gatherings.
So wedding must be really something else.
Yeah.
Talk about energy.
Yeah. Okay, so those are the two upcoming events that are planned right now. And yeah. Thank you, Susie. Take care and safe travels.
Yes, I hope your headache feels better by the afternoon.
Thank you.
Please send my best in the comma.
I will. Take good care.